Hi everybody, I hope that you're having a good Monday. It's a bank holiday here in Ireland, so lots of people are free, but everything is closed, so it's a bit different. I just want to show you two exercises from the use of English. The first one, part 4, with multiple choice options, and the second one, which is the open close exercise, where you have the text and the space, and it's necessary to choose from your mind or from your memory the correct or appropriate word for the exercise. Okay, so the first exercise is multiple choice. You have a text, an article, and you have the option of A, B, C, or D. So that's the style for the first one. And again, the second one is a similar text and similar article, and you have no option. You have to invent or select from your memory the appropriate or correct word for the exercise. Okay, and usually it's a preposition, it's maybe an auxiliary verb, it could be an expression, it could be a personal pronoun like I, you, he, she. It could be a possessive pronoun like my, your, his, her. Little options like that. Okay, so I'm just going to share the screen to show you the first exercise from the Cambridge exams. Okay, so the title is Dressing for Success. Okay, so that's the first thing you can see. I have underlined the key expressions and the important vocabulary. And this one, for example, dressing for success, is a famous expression. So if the person is wearing a suit, like a traje, the joke or the comment could be that he or she is dressing for success. So it's a typical combination, and that is the reason why I underline it. Okay, the first one is whether you like it or not. Again, the reason I identify this is because it's a typical expression. We normally say whether or not. So for example, I don't know if I will go to the city center. You can say that I don't know whether or not I will go to the city center. Okay, so it's very, very common. And here it is whether, like if you like it or not, when you go for a job interview. And the reason I have identified go here is because it's typical for an interview. Yes, everybody knows go to the shop, go to the cinema, go to Italy. But in English, we also say to go for an interview. Okay, and that's the connection here. And for the use of English, it's important to recognize these combinations because they're very frequent. And when you're learning English, it's necessary to know these little details. Okay, so when you go for a job interview, your personal appearance will be judged as an assessment, as an account, as an expression, or as an estimate of who you are. Okay, so there are the options A, B, C, or D. But first, I just want to talk a little about judge. Okay, so the verb you can see here on the bottom, I'm going to type. The verb is to judge. There is a famous expression, never judge a book by its cover. That's very famous as well. Okay, so the verb to judge, and here it is in the passive. So an appearance will be, that's the future in the passive. And just to remind you that the passive is the auxiliary verb to be plus the participle of the verb. And here the verb is to judge with the participle judged, and the future in the auxiliary verb to be will be judged. That's just an example of the passive in the future simple. And that is important in the exams. Typically in the Cambridge exams, you have the active and the passive very, very common and very frequent. Okay, so that again is the reason I have identified here the word judged, because it's in the passive. Okay, and then the next one, so that's 0, and the example, the answer they give is an expression. So the way you dress or your appearance is an expression of who you are. Okay, so just from looking at you, so I identify at because it's a preposition, and prepositions are very important in English, especially when you're learning from Spanish, because in Spanish you don't have as many prepositions as we have in English. And here, looking at you. So yes, looking is possible, looking through the window, looking over the book, or looking over the mountain. But here it's very appropriate and very clear that it's looking at, it's focused directly looking at you, okay? So again, in the part 2 of the use of English, it's possible that you have a space and it might be necessary to enter at, for example. So that's the reason it's important just to be familiar and to recognize these combinations. Okay, so just from looking at you, the interviewer, and again, you need to be clear with the difference between interviewer is the person from the company and the interviewee is the person taking the interview, the person who wants to be the job, to be the person in the position. So I'm just going to write that here. The interviewer is the person from the company, and then the interviewee is the person that is applying or that wants the position. This is important as well in relation to the other verb, the verb to employ. Okay, when you work for a company, they employ you, E-M-P-L-O-Y. So the company is the employer, that's the person who gives you the job, and the person who is working for the company is the employee. Okay, so it's very, very important that you're familiar with the appropriate and the accurate spelling of the two of them. Okay, in relation to this also, you can say the adjective I am employed by the company, or if the person has no job, they are unemployed. Okay, so the two adjectives that are typical, employed and unemployed. Okay, and then just to continue, the substantive would be employment and the negative substantive would be unemployment. So the level of employment in Ireland is very, very high, and the level of unemployment without the job is very low. Okay, so just remember that it's very typical and very important to be familiar with the adjective, the substantive, and the verb, the family, the different forms of every word. Okay, so here we have, just from looking at you, the interviewer will start. Then we have the options of an opinion. So something of an opinion about your capabilities. So let's check the options. We could be shaping your opinion, making their opinion, creating their opinion, and forming their opinion. Okay, so the first thing to say is that shaping opinion, yes, it's possible in many situations. You can shape public opinion. You can shape the opinion for the company. Make an opinion is not really typical. It's understandable, yes, but it's not very, very common and it's not so typical. It's a little strange. So for this reason, I would probably eliminate making. Creating an opinion is also possible in a different situation. If you're looking at the books and you have to create an opinion, yes, it's understandable, but the option D, forming an opinion, is definitely the most common, it's the most appropriate, and it's the most used in English. So for this reason, D, I think, is the correct answer. So if we go back to the text, forming an opinion about your capabilities. Okay, so your attitude to, and the reason for the preposition here is, what is your attitude to cigarettes? What is your attitude to traveling? So to is very possible with the combination with attitude, and that's the reason, just to be aware, to be conscious of the possible connection between the two, and how well you might something their organization. So how well, you is the subject, might is the first modal verb, so probably the next one is a verb also. So might is a modal verb, and then something their organization. So the options we have: put up with their organization, settle down to their organization, fit in with the organization, or live up to the organization. Okay, so these four expressions are very, very important. They're phrasal verbs, but they have completely different significances. Okay, so in this situation, fit, I think, is cabe in Espanol, cabe with the organization. And I think perfectly that is appropriate. So the interviewer will start forming an opinion about your capabilities, your attitude to work, and how well you might fit into the organization. So it's cabe with the company, in Spanish, cabe, fit with the organization. Okay, so the answer for number one is D, as we have seen. So for sorry, number one is D and number two is C. So the first phrasal verb, to put up with, is a very important phrasal verb, and it means to tolerate. So if you are in the library and you hear a lot of noise and it's necessary for you to continue working despite a pesar day, despite the noise, you have to put up with the noise. So you have to tolerate with the noise, or you have to tolerate the noise or tolerate the situation. You have to tolerate the traffic. You have to tolerate a person, which is the same. So you have to put up with the person, put up with the traffic, okay? Settle down to, so the verb settle is very important, of course. Settle is like calmar. So if your stomach is very painful, very sore, you take some medicine to calm your stomach, to settle your stomach. You can settle an agreement or settle an argument if you're having an argument with a friend and you want to calm or resolve the situation. But settle down is very typical when you're moving and you're traveling to a different country, and then finally you establish or you stay in the one place. So you settle in a country. But in this situation, it's settled down to. So I'm just going to show you, highlight the text so you can see it. Settle down is possible like calm. So it's the same. If you settle down to work, that means after activity, after your lunch, after conversation, finally you settle down to work. That means everything is calm and you're ready to work. And here, when you see settle, that's really usually the translation is like related to calm, okay? The next one is very, very good, and it's a high level, probably for the advanced phrasal verb, and it's related to expectations. So for example, if the father has a high expectation for the son or for the daughter wants to live up to the expectation. So they want to meet the expectation. So it's very typical if you go to the cinema and the movie, everybody is talking about the movie. People are excited. The expectation for you is very, very high. But after the movie, you are disappointed. So you say that the movie did not live up to expectations. So for that reason, it's very frequent and it's very common expression. So it's worth vale la pena. It's worth learning that expression to live up to, okay? So again, they're very different phrasal verbs, but for this exercise, I think the correct answer was letter C, to fit in with the organization. Okay, so the right image. So the reason I identify this is just a pronunciation, the image, but the verb is imagine. So if you go to the cinema, you want to imagine it is full, lleno in Espanol, it is full of people. So the pronunciation is to imagine, and the substantive is an image. So I think in Spanish you say imagen, but in English it would be image, and that's difficult for people learning English, the pronunciation. So the right image, or the appearance, is one that helps the interviewer. And again, I just explained the importance, the verb to interview. And here you have the interviewer. So it's the person from the company will start forming an opinion, as we said, about your capabilities. Okay, sorry, I'm on the next one. Interviewer here, yeah. So the right image is one that helps the interviewer something you as one of their team. So como as one of their team. And the options we have for number 4 are, I'm just going to close that. Visualize, reflect, observe, and foresee. Okay, so visualize for me and foresee are very, very, very similar. And they're very possible for this exercise. So visualize them, that you could visualize them. I think that's where we are. Sorry, number 3, helps the interviewer visualize you as one of their team. So for me, that sounds very comfortable. There's no real problem with that. But with the other option to foresee, which is option D, to foresee. So C is obviously related to the eyes, and for is related to the future. For example, to go forward, and then to foresee or to forecast is to predict. And when you have the option foresee, for me, that fits cabe, that fits a little better. So for me, the option more appropriate would be D to 4C. That's a good example of these exams because the options usually are very, very similar, and sometimes one option is just a little more appropriate, more common and more appropriate than the other option. And that's the example here. So I think D to 4C is, for CU as one of the team, is the correct answer. And something them that you could represent their company. So that's the object, the something them that you is obviously the interviewee, the person could represent their company. So the options for number 4 we have are reassure, clarifies, encourages, supports. So they're very, 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 very similar as well. To reassure is usually when you promise and you give a commitment or give a promise that everything will be okay. So the restaurant call you and they reassure you that everything is ready. Clarify is in relation to maybe a fact or the information or the data. So you want to clarify the information or to clarify the data. Encourage is very typical with people. So you want to encourage your friend, you want to encourage your teammates, you want to encourage your workmates. And support is very typical with people. You want to support your friend. Again, it's very similar to encourage. And the correct answer they have for number 4 here, I'm just going to show you in the answers just to help you with the identification. Number 4, they say 4A. Okay, so let's look at that again, 4A. And the appropriate answer would be reassure. So it's like a commitment, and in relation to the decision, it reassures them that you represent their company. So again, number 4, the options are very, very, very similar, and reassure is just the most appropriate in this context. Okay, it's difficult, but that's the answer, 4A, to reassure. So is like entonces or then or next. Find out, so that's a phrasal verb. Okay, find out, and that's the reason I underline. It means to discover the information or to discover the answer. So find out about the company, aprender, learn, discover about the company. Dress code, the código for the clothes. Okay, so you have a dress code. Sometimes it's very formal, sometimes it's casual. So that's the expression dress code. And the next word is very important, prior to the interview. So prior means before. It's related to priority because priority is the first object or the first thing. So it's the same. So before the cinema, prior to the cinema, we went to the restaurant. Okay, so prior to is before. So that's a good example as well. So prior to the interview, or see how people are dressed on the corporate website. So the reason I underlined on is the preposition appropriate for the website. So for the television, you could say on the television. The radio, we say on the radio. For the internet, we say on the internet. Newspaper, we say in the newspaper. Book, we say in the book. And here for website, we say on the website, okay? So that's just important to remember for everything because it's a very frequent situation. However, this is a linker. So linkers are very important in your writing, in your speaking, and we use them all the time in English every day. And sin embargo is the translation. However, even is a very important word, incluso. So however, sin embargo, inclusos, if, see, you, something the image right. Okay, so this is the combination here. So this is the full sentence really. If you, something the image right. And I have a little pista, a little clue here, because if you see the line connecting here to here, the expression is to get it wrong. So if you're in the exam and you have the exercise and you get it wrong, it's the opposite to get it right. And here, that's the clue and that's the reason. So if you get the image right, so if you look very good or if you look correct or if you look right, it may not be remarked on, okay? So remark, the verb to remark is like to comment, and it's very typical with the preposition on. So I remarked on the movie, I remarked on the meal. So that's the very typical combination, to remark on, okay? And it is the situation, it may not. And the options we have for number 6 are here: significantly, necessarily, appropriately, or strictly. So it may not significantly be remarked on, it may not necessarily be marked on, it may not appropriately be marked on, and strictly. So for me, the secret here is may not. Okay, it may not necessarily be the case, it may not necessarily be warm, it may not necessarily be correct. That's yes is very, very common. It may not necessarily be. And in terms of priority, in terms of order, I would probably select may not necessarily ahead of the other options. So number 6, the answer is it may not necessarily be remarked on. The interviewer, again, it's the person from the company. So the detail is very important between the interviewer from the company and you, the person who wants the job, is the interviewee. Okay. We'll just sense or we'll just feel that you look correct or that you look right. Okay. So it's not derecha, it's not directions, it's just in relation to correct, that you look correct. And feel something to being convinced. Okay, so, and feel something to being convinced that you are the right person for the job. And feel, sorry, that's the incorrect page, is feel open to be convinced, feel free to be convinced, feel alert to be convinced, and feel aware to be convinced. Okay, so first, when you see aware, it's very, very, very typical, aware of. So I'm just going to write that in the text. Aware of the situation, aware of the weather, aware of the comment, aware of the information. Open, it's very typical to, I am open to going plus the gerund. Okay, so that's the clue here. I'm open to having dinner. I'm open to speaking to my friend. I'm open to visiting the shop. It means you're available, and the mentality is open, abrir, to persuasion or convincing. Okay. So for that reason, because you have to, open to, and you can see in the option here, we have that's the next exercise. So as I said, you can see here in number 7, feel open to being convinced. So you can see it at the bottom, number 7, and feel open to being. So the secret here is the preposition to and the gerund, which is following. Okay, so as I said, open to going, open to meeting, open to having, and that's the reason that we select open here. And with free, with option B, we would say free to. Okay, so plus the verb, you are free to go, with the infinitive, free to have, free to look, free to learn. Okay, and alert doesn't really fit in this situation. Just be careful with alert, because alertar in Espanol, alertar in English is the verb to warn. Okay, so there's a little detail that's very important. And just before the next option, I just want to look at the vocabulary here. We have A, overtake, B, overthrow, C, overdo, and D, overcome. So they're 4 very, very good words in relation to your vocabulary. They're probably for the level of the advanced. And the first one, overtake, the context most typical is in the car. So if you have one car and you're driving on the road and the car in front is very slow, you want to overtake the car. Okay, so overtake, that's the context, very typical with the car. Overthrow, the verb throw is tirar, throw the ball, throw the book, tirar. Overthrow is very typical for politics. If the government are in control or the government are in power and there's a revolution and a lot of people protesting, the people overthrow the government. So it's related to the context of power. It's related to the context of politics, probably. Okay. Overdo is very important. The verb do is hacer. Okay, so I'm just going to show you in the screen. The verb here, hacer, is to do. Okay, and over is usually sobre. Okay, it's a preposition over the wall, over the moon, over the road. But in this situation, it's excess. Okay, so for example, if I eat at Christmas and then I overeat, it's like excess, demasiado. Okay, and here it's the same, that you do excessive. So if you have a party and you drink too much or you eat too much, in English we say you overdid. In the past, overdid, you overdid it at the party. So it's like excessive, okay? And the last one is the same. So you have the verb to come and you have the preposition over, but in this situation, the translation is, or the context is, if you have a problem, usually you overcome. I think in Spanish, superar. So overcome the problem is superar. Okay, so that's the vocabulary. And if we go back to the last sentence, feel open to being convinced that you are the right person for the job. But if you get it wrong, that's relation to part 5. It's like lograr, achieve. If you get it wrong, it can be very difficult. So it is the subject, because every structure usually needs the subject. So it is the subject in English, and in Spanish this does not really exist. Can is the verb, the modal verb, and after the modal you have the infinitive. It can be, for example, if we go back to number 3, you might suit the organization or fit into. So after the modal might, you have the infinitive, and after the modal can, you have the infinitive be. Very difficult. To something, the negative impression you may have already made. So the last connection here is to make. You make an effort, you make an impression. Okay, so it's very typical with impression to make an impression, and that's very important combination and connection to remember. So it can be very difficult to something, the negative impression that you may already have made. And the options are overtake. I don't think so, because the context is typical the car. Overthrow. I don't think so, because the context is probably political. Overdo, as I said, probably not, because it's excessive in the context. As I said, overdo the party, overdo the eating, you eat too much, demasiado. So finally, I think the correct answer is D, to overcome, superar. I think superar the negative impression that you made. Okay, so that's just an example of exercise 1 from the use of English. You can see a lot of detail and a lot of important vocabulary and important prepositions and connections and combinations. So that's typically the way or the approach that I help people with this exercise. Okay, so if we move to the next exercise, part 2, and this is very similar, but at the same time it's different. Okay, so we have an article here, a text, 2 paragraphs, probably from a magazine or from a newspaper, and the title is How Technology is Helping People to Talk. Okay, so the instruction here is you have number 0, number 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. You have no option, so you have to select the appropriate word for the space from your memory, from your instinct. And normally the instinct is very important in this exercise. What you feel is most appropriate and what you feel is the best option usually is a good idea. Okay, so if we look at the first paragraph, the term the term eye gaze technology may not, there's 0 at the top, may not mean. Okay, so I'm going to show you just with the option here of the pencil. Okay, yeah, so may not mean. Okay, so let me move that. Much to most people. So the first connection is mean and to. So for example, my friend is very special. So my friend, mean is like significar. My best friend means a lot to me. So the typical preposition with mean is with the preposition to. Okay. The verb gaze is very important. Okay, so I'm going to type it here in the text on the article. Gaze, the verb, It's like to look, very similar. It's also like the verb to stare. But look is just more general. I look at the newspaper, I look at the television. Stare is fijar. Okay, so fijar is stare. But gaze, well, fijar, stare, is also usually maybe negative. It's rude, like maleducado. It's rude to stare. That's the expression. Okay, so let me write that. It's rude to stare. And to gaze is usually maybe a dream or romantic, and it's typical in the moon and the stars. So if you look in the sky, you gaze at the stars and the moons, okay? So star, moon, just so you remember. Okay, and to gaze at is very typical preposition. Okay, so if we go back to the article, and to gaze, as I said, is como fijar, but it's more romantic, or it's more amazing, okay? But it can be life-changing. So the reason I identify this is because the verb is to change, cambiar, no problem, everybody knows that. Life is la vida, but the verb change in this situation is the substantive, life-changing. So it's one word and it's the substantive. And we have the hyphen in the middle. So that's the reason it's one word, life-changing. It's a substantive in this case, okay? The next combination is the verb to suffer, sufrir, and the typical preposition with suffer is suffer from. So the person who is sick or ill, he or she suffers from the illness, suffer from influenza. So here, that's the connection here, suffer from a severe. Speech is como discurso, or your ability to speak. So a speech problem. Okay, so the context is very important. Already you can see it's a little difficult vocabulary here with eye gaze technology. But we have to try and understand the gist, or the general idea. So I'm going to write that word, the gist. You have to try and understand the gist of the, okay, it's difficult with the Zoom to do that, but G for garden, I for Ireland, S for Saturday, and T for television. Gist, the general idea, is the objective. You have to understand the general idea of the article, even though you don't understand every single word. Okay. Number 9, I think, was maybe the most difficult. It was very, very hard answer for number 9. And the answer they gave for number 9 is having. Okay, so here is gist. And for number 9, they said having. So having been invited, that means really after. It's a very, very difficult answer, but the official answer was having. Okay, so having been, or after, well, having is more appropriate, but the significance is like after. Being invited to, that's the typical preposition. I was invited to a party, invited to a wedding. Try one such, so this is it's in relation to the previous example of the technology. So that's a difficult word here to understand. One such. So for example, I like the summer days, and one such day was last week. So it's like one of those days. It's a difficult explanation of that word such, and it's probably a little advanced, but it's not necessary to understand the gist of the sentence. But for the future, to learn and to master that word would be very important. Aid is very important. So it's a verb to aid, como to help, ayudar. So asistir, no, because asistir is a false friend. Asistir in Espanol is to attend in English. So aid, the verb to aid, is like ayudar, okay? And here it's a substantive, and aid is like a help. So the typical examples are first aid. So you do a first aid course. Okay, a hearing aid is very typical as well. you know, the object to help when you have a problem with your listening, you have a hearing aid. And this situation is the same. It's a high-tech communication aid, okay? I find sitting, staring at the computer, and again, number 10 was very, very difficult. So I think number 9 and number 10 are extremely difficult, especially for first certificate level, or especially for the beginning or the first attempts or the first tries of these exercises. But anybody who has the answer for number 9 and number 10 deserves a lot of credit. Number 10 is myself. So I find myself, that means I discover, suddenly, de repente, I discover or I realize, darse cuenta, find myself sitting, staring at a computer screen. So remember, the verb to stare is like fijar, and it's usually negative or maleducado, rude. But here it's just, it's not rude, it's not negative, it's just looking at the computer screen with no focus, maybe with no focus, okay? So I find myself, as I said, the answer for number 10 is very difficult, and the answer for number 9 also. Staring at, that's the typical combination, a computer screen. As a journalist, so the reason as is underlined is because it's for a profession. You work as a doctor, you work as a dentist, you work as a teacher. So for profession and for a job in English, it's as. Okay, so in Espanol, it's trabajo como profesor. And como has 2 translations in English, as and like. So for the job in English, as, work as a doctor, okay? And that's the reason, because many people make that confusion. So in English, as for a job or a profession. As a journalist, this is nothing new for me. For the fact that this screen features, and again, number 11 was extremely difficult. So I have to say, from experience, number 9, 10, and 11 were very, very tricky and very, very hard. And the correct answer for number 11 was but or except. Okay, so except for the fact, or but for the fact that this screen features a red dot which tracks the movement of the eye. So don't worry, because really 9, 10, and 11 were very hard and a bit difficult. Okay, so we continue to the next paragraph. I start by looking at, so that's the preposition again, look at the television, look at the person, look at the letter from an on-screen. And again, we have the hyphen, if you remember the vocabulary, the hyphen. So it's one word, and it's the preposition on the screen, the plantilla. But with the hyphen, it's one word. Keyboard is the important vocabulary for the computer or for the laptop. It's the part of the computer, the board that you type, okay, or that you escribir, really, but type. However, as a linker, sin embargo, I could is a modal verb. I could, and then this is probably the conditional, and I think number 12 is not too difficult. I think people at advanced level should have no problem with number 12 when you think and think and think. So I think the correct answer is if I wanted to. I could if I wanted. It's a very typical expression. I could go to the city centre if I wanted to, okay? And that's the answer for number 12. Select alternative screens. And number 13 is very interesting. So it's a phrasal verb. So the alternative screens contain vocabulary and expressions, or the alternative screens consist of vocabulary and expressions in the context of this sentence. So the answer for number 13, and again, if you have the correct answer, you deserve credit, and it's made up of, okay? So that's the phrasal verb, made up of, and I'm going to show you in the document, made up of, okay? So if you make a cake or you make some dinner, you could say lasagna is made up of pasta tomato, and meat. Okay, so it's like consists of. Okay, so it's a very common phrasal verb for sure, very, very common and very typical, but it's a little tricky, especially when you're learning English, and you deserve credit if you have the correct answer and if you understand that phrasal verb. Okay, made up of, consists of. Okay, which for experienced users would, that's the modal verb. And again, after the modal verb, we have the infinitive. Okay, and with this verb speed, we have the preposition speed up. It's like to go fast. So you're driving on the road and it's a bad idea to speed up. It's a bad idea to go quicker, to go faster, or to go with more speed. So it's a typical combination to speed up. With the children in the school, if one is slow at the back and they're talking in the line for walking, the teacher can say, come on, speed up, or hurry up. And here it's the same, but it's not the child, it's cosas, things. Okay, and here we have doubt. So the typical combinations with doubt are without doubt, and no doubt. And I think no doubt is perfect here. So they would no doubt increase the velocity, speed of cosas, of things, speed up. Okay, so the answer for number 14 is no doubt. And the next sentence, the letter or word I've selected pop up. So the verb to pop up is like jump very quickly. It's typical on the computer. An advertisement pops up. So pop is like jump, go very, very quickly. And it's typical in the street, in the city center, a pop-up shop. So imagine the space in the center is empty, and next week they create a new shop, but very temporary. Okay, so a temporary shop, and new, it's a pop-up shop. It's a very short-term idea, short-term business. Also a book for the children. You open the book and the object pops up. So it's very common in those contexts. And here's the same, pops up at the top of the screen. Slowly, I build up my message. So that means to construct or to increase, accumulate. I build up my message. More speed would be good as, okay, in this situation, as usually is como, but I think here it means because, okay? I'm going to the cinema as I have a free day or a day off, okay? So as is because in this situation, okay? So more speed would be good as or because this isn't a fast way to communicate. Something with the aid of predictive text. So in the context of the sentence, if you want to read again, it's probably easy if you understand the sentence and you understand the atmosphere or the sense of the sentence. Okay, so if you want to read again, more speed would be good because this isn't a fast way to communicate. Something with the help or the aid of predictive text. And I think everybody understands predictive text. It's on the telephone when you write and the computer or the iPhone predicts what you want to say. Okay, but here the correct answer is even, incluso in Espanol, even with. Okay, and that's probably normal, it's probably understandable, it should be okay for most people. Number 15, even with the aid of predictive text. Number 16 is very difficult as well. So this exercise is bastante difícil. So it's quite difficult. 9, 10, 11, and 16 in particular are very difficult. The correct answer for, well, first, seems is parecer. So it's como, parecer como. It seems like a long time. My phrase, this is an amazing machine, is complete. So I don't think there's no clue, there's no secret, and there's no hint for the answer. The correct answer is what. W-H-A-T, after what. So the answer for 16, I'm just going to move that, sorry, so you can see. After what seems like. Okay, so that's the correct answer for number 16. After what seems like a long time. And my phrase, as I said, my phrase, this is an amazing scene, is complete. I stare, again, the verbs fijar, and it's usually negative, and it's typical with the preposition at. Stare at the person, stare at the phrase, and it comes back to me. And that basically means it returns. It's not difficult. It's very logical. It's very normal. It comes back to me. It returns to me in a synthesized voice. Okay. So that's an example of part 1 and part 2 of the use of English from probably in between the first and the advanced level, the FCE and the CAE. And I just wanted to show you some tips and give you some advice for the exercise and how to prepare for them. They're difficult, but I think repetition is important. I think practice is important. And after time, you should be a little more comfortable and you should predict or foresee the possible answers, because there's sometimes repetition in the exercises. And yeah, so good luck with the exercises. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's just a little example to show you the way to help or the way to assist with these exercises. So thank you very much. And if you want to follow on Facebook, I'll try to produce more little videos, and Instagram as well, to show some stories and little tips in the next few weeks. Okay. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy the rest of your week, and talk to you soon. Bye.